Happy Monday, everybody! You're listening to the Personal Playlist Podcast, fondly referred to as the P3. I'm Noah Daniel.
Music is a world within itself, with a language we all understand.
I am so excited to have Ruthie Sloan here on the Personal Playlist Podcast. Ruthie is a teacher and learner with early year students in the Peel District School Board. Creative problem solving is her superpower, and she loves to challenge and reimagine learning outside of the box. Ruthie and her husband Dave have two boys, Isaiah and Max, who are teaching them how to be epic parents. Ruthie loves running long distance and just completed a crazy 50K race with her friend Jonathan. So she loves reading, tweeting, and blogging on topics of vulnerable teaching, math, assessment, and creative problem solving with technology. Welcome to the show, Ruthie.
Yay!
I have some questions. I want to understand the topic of vulnerable teaching.
Oh, that's a big one. You could take this whole podcast to talk about that. Where to start? So a lot of this, even like thinking and unpacking what vulnerable teaching is, this whole project of songs and my song selections really kind of unpacks the topic about vulnerable teaching in relationships. Which we'll get to later. But right now, for me, what that vulnerable teaching really is about investing in relationships and the things that we think are great for creating student communities, having transparency, building like relationships to understand who our little learners are is the same type of principles and philosophies I really believe that we need to start to build with the people that we work with, because we spend X amount of hours with them that we do that with our students and sometimes. And I think that we sometimes forget to kind of conceptualize ourselves as learners on a journey with other people. And since I started beginning teaching, it's really been looking at how do I kind of bridge these somewhat separate spaces of my life to create more of intersections, so you could say, and kind of bridging these. And the learning that has been involved throughout that process has been pretty epic and just life-changing. I don't know how much I want to go into talking and unpacking this because it's going to come out in all of my songs.
Okay, but I
and the stories.
Would like to invite you, saying that. I want to build an on-adventure show around that idea. You got me thinking in 100 directions, and I would love to, after we record, talk to you about coming on and hosting with me, co-hosting a show just about that. So
yeah, I think that there's a lot that happens when we let down our guard. And I think, like, looking back on my years and my journey as an educator in the system, there was so many powerful moments when I was more intentional and made choices about letting myself be seen and to be present in the lives of other people, not just the 9 to 5, but on the weekends, and kind of more of a mentality of doing life together. And just what happens to your learning trajectory. Like I mentioned in the bio that John and I just ran this crazy 54K race, and the humbling experience of John's kids standing at the finish line cheering you on, and Jenny, his wife, who was there, singing like encouragement to you the whole like end of the race when you're ready to give up. There's just something powerful about people that you not only teach beside, but you actually know and have connections to their personal histories as well, and you're part of that story. It just takes the thinking and the reflection that you do together to a whole different level.
Right.
I don't know if that answers your question.
No,
and it's not. And it's like
just
learning.
Beginning to answer the question. I wanna spend real time on this.
Yeah, like I have to say that when I started teaching, a lot of my life was very compartmentalized, and my older son Isaiah has autism, and it was a lot for me that I struggled with just not including, like, having a home life and having a teaching life and trying to be professional, because that's what you were told as a rookie teacher, keep things professional and strive for professionalism. And whatever that concept was, it just wasn't working. And I felt like a horrible parent because I couldn't meld these two worlds, and I didn't want to tell people about my family. And I guess a lot of that started to like filter into this understanding that you kind of lived two lives, like a home life and a school life. And I really valued vulnerability in my classroom and being able to be open with my students, but it just stopped there at the door. And I was asked by a very powerful mentor of mine kind of how to expand that beyond the wall, like just the classroom, my classroom door into the walls of the school, and what that would look like, what that would sound like. And just more than like surface level encouragement, but actually, doing something like having them over for dinner or inviting them into your personal space or going to their personal spaces. And when I started to make those small steps, and they were small steps at the beginning, things started changing. And like my learning started like going at a bigger, higher trajectory, because people were able to ask questions, and they knew enough about my background that they knew where the levels of comfort lied and where that like zone of proximal development to push me what like exceeded. So, I mean, it takes on so much more power when you know the person and you know the individual, and you can say to them as like a co-learner, I see you, and this is what I like want you to try next, right? And this is why, right? That reflection has roots. And I think that we believe that for our kids, but like it takes a whole different trajectory when you believe it with other individuals and your peers and your colleagues. I mean, like 2 summers ago, I ended up living with a bunch of my colleagues because I was homeless when we were moving. And it was like this big jump my husband and I took. We moved all the way up to Bolton from Toronto, and it was the chase of community and the chase of like living these radical ideals that we actually thought we believed in, and what that meant in like true to form fashion. I'm not the type of person that just shallowly wades into anything. It's one of those things that you start a reflection and it just keeps going, and your life starts changing along with it.
I think that's really cool because you're saying that you're not just doing lip service to something or like trying it out, like you go whole in, whole heart.
Yeah, whole heart, whole in. Yeah, we do life together. And that's like a lot of the people that I teach and I learn with, like, these are people that we put together collaborative inquiries, and we went deep into like applying for grants and getting money for like kindergarten renovations, for like play spaces and stuff like that. And like the work that we were putting into it didn't like just stop at a bell. It kept continuing, and the conversations kept continuing because we were so invested in the work we were doing, but also in each other, that like we would bring food, and then our kids would come and we'd like be working on a project and our kids would be in the backyard together. And it's just that life kind of mentality. Instead of it just being about one person's learning or another, it's about an us, an informal us, right, or a big us. And that shared kind of ownership is what so far in my journey has really changed a ton of things.
That is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, I mean, each year there's been like different changes here and there because I've gone through different schools. I've gone through like navigating PLNs. Twitter was a huge door opener because that was where I found John and Matt Aldridge and a whole bunch of other people.
I feel like it allowed John and so for forever, like the way that.
No, it's so funny. So John, this is a very funny story. So Matt Aldridge, we were at OAME my second year as an educator, and we were sitting at the back, and if Connie Kadrini is listening to this, I apologize in advance. But we were sitting at the back of her session, and it was the first session of OAME. And I had done a lot of work up to that point on spatial reasoning. And my MA professors were Joan Moss and Bev Caswell, who wrote Taking Shape. And it was just being released. And I had sat on a panel with Davis and a whole bunch of other people looking and kind of diving into what theory and practice meant, and kind of unpacking what that looked like in kindergarten before the resource was like published. So Matt Aldridge comes in, this guy in this like suave hat and stuff, and sits at the back beside me, asks if the chair is empty. I said no, didn't know anybody. And he has this version of Taking Shape, which hadn't, like, it was released that day. And I was like, how'd you get this? And him and I just started bantering. And then I realized he handed me his business card and it said Matt Aldridge on it. And I was like, oh my goodness, you're my board. And oh my goodness, you are the Matt Aldridge. And I was like, I've been following you on Twitter all year. And like, I've been stalking your tweets and responding to all the questions you put out. And I figured you were just too busy and too popular. You and this Mr. Jonathan So, you have so much followers that I just figured you just didn't have time for me. But like, I'm so encouraged by everything you tweet because it's really made me realize how much thinking is going on in our board, and like the quest for relationships, and like these things that I believe and cry about in the car, like you guys are doing them in real life. And like, it's been such an encouragement to me. And he's like, no way. He's like, I don't know why I wouldn't have responded. So it happened that my Twitter settings were in private. So he didn't see any of the messages I had been doing. So he switched it on and he's like, oh, here they are. And so he saw my messages and he's like, you know what? Jonathan So is like 4 rooms down and he's presenting this year. He's like, you should go in there and introduce yourself. I was like, no. And he was like, yeah, do it. So I ran into John's, like, he was about to present and I run in and I'm like, Jonathan So, I have been your biggest stalker fan on Twitter. And you have no idea. Like, I've been crying in my car, and if it wasn't for you and your tweets, I'd probably not be a teacher anymore. But I think that you're amazing. And I've been, like, privately stalking you, and now you're going to get all my tweets. And then, like, I had this vulnerability, like, shock and awe moment, and I ran out of the room, was like, I'm not going to talk to him ever again. And, like, John had to present, so he didn't come to find me afterwards. And Matt was kind of, like, sticking around to see what would happen, kind of laughing in the background. But after that, we became really good friends and we started hanging out and he invites you to his class. And John is just that type of guy that if you have questions and you're wanting to reflect, he's there for you. He's like that coach in your ear.
Yeah, he's such a good guy. I like them both so much and I've had them on the show, which is so funny that we're talking about them. Speaking about the show and vulnerability, tell me a little bit about the experience of preparing for your P3.
Okay, so coming on the show and my music selection, this is a funny story. I was anxious because I love music, but there's always, like, all of my friends and like close people to me actually have a song that belongs to them from a moment that's taken from our friendship or somewhere along the journey. And there's like a line or a lyric from it that's even to the point where it's been their ringtone. So preparing for this, going through the mentality of what songs to pick, this was real, like a real life struggle. Like, it's not about genre and like artist. It is about like moments and stories and people and relationships. And like, I was heaving and hawing over this to the point where I was like, didn't know what to do. I talked to Lee, I talked to John, and I was like, guys, I need advice. And the advice was, open the email, write 3 songs down and close it, and that's it. And I was like, okay. So I still heaved and hawed, but then I was given this deadline. So I opened up the email and I wrote the first 3 songs that came to mind. I closed the email and sent it and thought about it later. And I was like, you know what? Those are actually the 3 songs I would have picked. So it was good advice in that, like, I just had to pick 3 songs, like 3 songs. One that's nostalgic, one that's the one that like defines your life or whatever, and then the one that picked me up. I was like, those are the 3 songs right now that I'm going to claim as mine. It was one of those moments that I was like, you just got to take the thinking out of it because you're going to overthink this.
And I think that that's what people do, especially when they're audiophiles or when music is so pivotal in their life. But the other thing that's cool about like that decision to kind of just throw down whatever your 3 are in that moment is it is a snapshot of who you are in that moment. And, you know, people change all the time, but this is an opportunity to tell your story through your 3 songs. So let's start with your nostalgic song. Of all the songs in all the land, how did you come to this one?
Okay, so this song, Forever Young by Bob Dylan, was actually a song that kind of captures the beginning of my journey into education. I was fortunate enough to have a really amazing admin, my first LTO, the first October of teaching. And she was one of those gently leading you to wisdom type of people that like really valued reflection. And the song and the lyrics itself are kind of reminiscent of conversations that we had as I was going along my journey and working in the school with her, of just this mentality of keeping this mind that's hopeful and that really has a zest for learning. And it was kind of like her forewarning that things are going to get harder and crazier. She's like, but knowing who you are and having your identity piece is really where the magic starts to happen. Again, this surrounds itself around relationships. This woman, to me, really encapsulates this song. And every time I hear it, I just go back to the portable or back to that grade, that kindergarten class and hear like her singing it over me. This woman, her name's Pam Bondette. We ran a half marathon together, again, running. But we did tons of things that were just crazy ideas that, we just wanted to see our kids and our students like shine and have these experiences. And it wasn't, it was explain your thinking. And that is so powerful as an educator, especially a rookie teacher. When you find somebody that honors that reflection and that kind of validates that you have it in you, and tells you to take it and shine and to teach it to your students and to use it as kind of like your guide when you're working with kids. Because I like looking back on this journey, that has really been the thing that I keep coming back to, is that our ability to reflect really defines where we go.
So true.
But sharing those reflections in our out loud voice even makes things more powerful, not just to ourselves and it validates our own thinking, but to the people that we allow into those thinkings.
Forever Young, Bob Dylan.
May God bless and keep you always. May your wishes all come true. May you always do for others and let others do for you. May you build a ladder to the stars and climb on every rung. And may you stay forever young. May you stay forever young. May you grow up to be righteous. May you grow up to be true. May you always know the truth and see the light surrounding you. May you always be courageous, stand upright and be strong. And may you stay forever young. May you stay forever young.
Thinking about that mentor of yours, I'm thinking to the lyrics at the end of the song where he says, you know, may your hands always be busy, may your feet always be swift, may you have a strong foundation when the winds of changes shift. And it made me think about running for you, and it made me think about, you know, your foray into education. And the reality is that change happens, and we do need strong foundations to manage those changes. So it's so great that you had a mentor to really give you that grounding and to help you slowly lead yourself really through discovery and reflection.
And nurturing that fragile state when you are a rookie teacher.
Yeah.
Like I look back and I just think I'm grateful for those mentors that come in and they don't stand in your way, but they gently guide you to wisdom, as so I say, instead of like cramming it down your throat. But they still allow you to grow, which is a very hard balance for a mentor.
It is. It's something that we're working on in helping our on-ed mentors to be able to do, because you don't want to be the person with the answers. You want to be the person that asks the questions and the safe place for you to be vulnerable and learn and all of those things. So you're right. It's a tall order. So it's wonderful when all of the elements work together to really help you. So when you were deciding on this identity song of yours, what made this be like that? I'm writing it, close the book, send an email to Noah kind of song.
Oh man. Okay. So this song actually came on my running list this summer. I was not a country music person per se. Like I lived in Saskatchewan for a while. My brothers live in Calgary now. And I was introduced to country music out there, but coming back to Toronto wasn't a big heavy hitter of a genre of music. But this summer, a girlfriend of mine, we went to the Queen's Plate, which is a horse race, and High Valley was playing there. And so my memories from the summer were watching her sing and dance, and a bunch of us singing and dancing and singing at the top of our lungs to half lyrics that we knew. And so I downloaded the song onto my playlist, and true to form, Spotify will play the next song or songs like it from the artist. And this song came on, and I was in the middle of a big run, and all of a sudden I started listening to these lyrics, and the lyrics are so powerful. they talk about just this person's, I would call it existential crisis almost, but they're having a conversation about kind of like living life on the edge and just giving it 110% of all you got. And I feel like that in a lot of ways is how I live my life, if I was to explain it in some way. It's not just I shallowly wade into things. I just jump head first and I just give it all I have. And this weekend, I promised my husband today when I talked about this song, I wouldn't start crying, but you'll have to forgive me if I start getting quivery. But this weekend when John and I ran this 54K race, it was beautiful outside, but it was very hard, and it was very physically, emotionally draining. And we had been training all summer long, John and I had been sick for the past 6 weeks and was trying to get over a cold, and like it was just a lot was going on. And to be able to still speak those lyrics and still believe that whatever you do, you're just giving 110% in, is just, I don't know how to explain it. In that, like, when you do that, you often feel very alone. And this weekend when we were running the trail race, it was surprised because I was literally talking to everybody on the trail race, because you stop for like the water stations, the aid stations, kept telling them I had this really like crazy friend named John who signed me up for this race and hadn't ran over 32, 33 kilometers. So like at 35K mark, I said to one of the aid station guys, I was like, this is a small victory. And he's like, well, you know, it's a better victory when you get to the end. And I was like, yeah, not the end yet. I was like, this 35 is still monumental. It's a personal best for my friend John. Like, he signed me up for this and said that we should do this. And like, I'm claiming all the mini victories in between the end. Right. And, they were just like, keep going, keep going, keep going. We get to the end of the race. And then everybody that I talked about, my friend John, who they thought was a little crazy for signing a friend up to run a 54, happened to know John. And they were like, oh, you're friends with Jonathan So. This makes sense. He is that type of crazy. And you're just not that crazy. You're his type of crazy. I was like, yes. Like, when you find yourself in a community with people that you would label as crazy, you find that you're not so crazy after all, but the right kind of crazy. I don't know how to explain that in logic, but I don't know.
Well, maybe I'm the right kind of crazy because I totally get it without any further explanation. Yeah. So here is your song, and it's very upbeat, and it's probably great for a running playlist. Dear Life, High Valley.
Dear life, I hope you know I've loved you every mile down this road. Had my share of hits and misses, trying to keep between the ditches. Dear life, I hope you know. Dear life, what's your plan? Is where I'm supposed to be, right where I am. If it is, then I ain't leaving. If it ain't, I'll keep on dreaming. Dear life, what's your plan? Now you're flying by too fast, I'm about to make you last. Begging, won't you please just slow down? You're scaring me to death, I'm trying to catch my breath. Don't wanna let you go, I'm hanging on for dear life. Dear hanging on for dear life. Dear life.
And then you reached the end.
Yeah.
And you weren't hanging on for dear life because you did it. How do you feel about your accomplishment?
Oh man, there's a lot of tears. There's like, I've been through labor. I've been through a lot of crazy things in life, but honestly, running this 54 and just the 48 hours that happens afterwards is still an emotional roller coaster. I mean, physically, you're still in a lot of pain, but the understanding that you were braver than you've ever been in your entire life, and you were able to continue to tell yourself to be just a little bit more braver for like 5.5 hours is crazy. Like, I there's no words. Like, I wasn't anticipating this when John asked me to sign up for it in December. But when John so invites you on a crazy life-changing adventure, the answer is yes. It's never no. Because everything changes. The way that my kids view exercise has changed. The way that even like the coaching of my running team. This morning I came back and my cross country team was waiting for me, and I'm hobbling in because I got injured at like the 38 kilometer mark, I fell and I did something to my wrist. So it's in a splint and just a sprain band, and it's like all taped up. And I still had to run the last 14K holding, like I smashed my water bottle and I smashed my shoulder into the ground because I tripped over a root. But I still had to complete that 14K and still sprint across the finish line holding a water bottle in that hand. But you just keep pushing yourself, because the thought of not finishing is worse than the thought of hobbling to the end. And John, who's also running this, had been injured for the last 6 weeks. So this was a very hard race for him too, because physically, like after 32, he was like mush. But the two of us just kept like pushing each other on. Like on the trail, you'd feel a little hand on your back of John, who's like, I'm going to push you up this hill. And to have somebody physically do that, not just like emotionally do that in a colleague in a friendship or whatnot, but physically do that to you. The picture and the image of that is very powerful. Like I don't know like how to compare it to something else in life, but again, it's that understanding of the transparency and the vulnerability of things that are happening in school life, or like coming out in like your home life, that are coming out in running, that are coming out in all these type like little chapters and areas of your being. Does that make sense? So
yeah, because you can't compartmentalize humanity.
Not at all. And the running this weekend was a lot of that. I mean, I had told, and John, I don't know if this has been said yet, but John had told me he could only run 5K. And the reason I actually got into running was after my son was born, my second son. I just needed mom mental time, and no judgment, but I was like, I need to get out of my condo because I have an infant and an older kid and I need some me time. So I just started running, and it turned into my first 5K of just wanting time, like sanity time. And then the runs got longer and longer. And then my first 30K I signed up for because I taught a grade 4-5 girls health class. And one of the challenges I gave to my girls, because it was on puberty, was that I said, I want you to spend 15-20 minutes with your fathers or some trusted male relative in your family. And we had a very closed, very close-knit community, very religious. And I really wanted the girls in my community and the relationships I had with them and their parents to kind of grow deeper, because I knew that the questions were coming, and I wanted them to have safe spaces that they could talk to somebody, right? And adults. In their culture, they told me they didn't talk to their moms about puberty, which was also something that I was thinking through and like talking to them and reflecting with them about. But they did have time that they spent with their dad. So I said, I just want 15 minutes. I'll send you home with board games. I'll send you home with whatever, right? So it ended up that they started a running club with their dads. And the dads, a bunch of them, ran together with their daughters once a week. So
That's
the following
so cool.
year, like
Who
the health
did
class
that?
was over and gone. Hold on, it gets better. It was my first at that first school, my first year of teaching. So hold on, it gets better, Noah. So the first year I ran a 30K was because that following year, the grade 5s that had moved on to the next school, the dad came back and said, my daughter and I have signed up for a relay race to run around the bay, and we'd really like you to come and join us. There's going to be like students at your every 10 marker mile. If you'll come run the whole 30, you'll get to see them all. So I signed up for a 30K. I'd never run 30 kilometers, but I signed up to see my students. And every 10K, I saw them again. And it was just that powerful thing of doing life together that made me decide that I was going to go back every year. And every year I've gone back, the dads have been there again. So I said to John, I was like, look, if I can sign up for a 30, it wasn't beautiful. It was kind of hot messish, but if I can do a 30, anybody can, right? So John was like, no way, no way, no way. So he ran 5, then he ran 10, and then he ran half, and then he ran around the bay last year and like smoked my time. So when he said to me in December, hey, Ruthie, I'm going to sign you up for this 54K, I was like, sure. I was like, I will try it. I'm like, because I'm the one that got you into this. I was like, can't be that bad. But my whole relationship with running has been around relationships, and it's just been so interesting. Like I wouldn't have called myself a runner when I started. It was just survival for me as a parent, but it's interesting how many connections and relationships, especially with educators and teaching, have kind of developed and like blossomed along the way.
And then you get in these situations where you need a song to change your zone. So you had Running to Change Your Zone, and you talk a lot about connections. What's the connection of your Pick Me Up song to all of this?
Okay, this is another relationship pick me up. So, okay, you have to picture this. We opened a new school, not this year, but 3 years ago. It's a long time ago. And we had 40 kindergarten kids in our class. And the school was James Grieve, and it's like in the middle of farmers' fields. So there's no sidewalk, no nothing. These kids get dumped off at this school, and they're like stuck in this building that has like even outdoor play. There's no shade covering or anything. And a lot of them are new to the country. They don't speak English. They're like upset because who are these kids? Because there was no such thing as kindergarten for them. Like they have no sense of who these other people are. And September was really rough. And when you teach in kindergarten, your relationship with your DC and teaching partner is huge, like huge. And being able to communicate and build a relationship is hard, especially when you have 40 kids that are trying to rely on you and you don't speak the same language. So September was rough. And there was one day we were cleaning up, and I forget like what all transpired and why it was such a rough day, but it was really rough. And YouTube, we put on some songs at the end of the day to get kids, like just to clean up the class, get kids settled before buses. And the song that came on was Let It Go, the Frozen soundtrack, from the Frozen soundtrack. And also if you teach kindergarten, this song has epic sight words, FYI. So if you're teaching epic sight words, let me tell you. So we're cleaning up this classroom, and my teaching partner and I were just frustrated and like just kind of defeated with like everything that had gone on, and like we were learning awkwardly how to communicate to each other, and we were spending more time with each other than we were with our spouses, and there was so much unbalance towards things. And all of a sudden, the two of us started singing this song and belting out, like there was harmonizing, there was everything, the lyrics of this song. And like the song is just about letting things go. And it's kind of ironic at the time, but all these 40 kindergarten kids are like staring at us in like shock and awe. I don't know if they all knew the song or what the deal was, or the fact that there was two adults that were singing to each other in like half smiles, half like, you know, from their gut and from their being. So this song, my Pick Me Up song, is really like reflective and goes back to that afternoon when Melinda and I were singing at the top of our lungs. And from that point on, her and I have become such good friends. She's at another school, but it's like we still stay in contact. We still are involved in each other's lives. And like our thinking and reflecting still has continued, even though we've gone in different ways. But the song was actually not only put on this, but also on my playlist on Saturday. And the last lap that John and I took, John, after he passed the finish line, he was like, Ruthie, he's like, I heard you on the last lap. You were singing Let It Go. It's like, yep, at the top of my lungs. And I didn't care who heard me. I was going up that hill. But it's a perfect song to like belt out when you are just wanting that extra energy, like that extra like push to get things done. But it's also for me that understanding at the end of the day that there's sometimes you just got to let it go. Like, yes, let it go, but also just let it go.
It makes total sense. It's a liberating song, and it's a song that reminds you not to hold on to too many things that upset you. And sometimes you have to release yourself from that. So let's play it. This is the Idina Menzel version from the Frozen soundtrack.
The snow glows white on the mountain tonight, not a footprint to be seen. A kingdom of isolation, and it looks like I'm the queen. The wind is howling like this swirling storm inside. Couldn't keep it in, heaven knows I tried. Don't let them in, don't let them see. Be the good girl you always have to be. Conceal, don't feel, don't let them know. Well, now
Now, if you are listening to the song for your own pick-me-up, I really recommend you playing it all the way through because it builds from there. How are you feeling about sharing your P3 with me today?
Oh man, better. I hate listening to myself. I've done some webinars, and I always am anxious about how I sound on radio, or just like in somebody else's ears. And I was really nervous about talking about music because this is something, again, as I said, the stress and anxiety of picking the 3 songs was really hard because there's so many different pieces that you could pick. But I feel good. I feel like you ask me again in a year, probably we'll have 3 different songs and more stories. That's all part of life.
Beautiful vulnerability that music can be the soundtrack to. So I want to thank you so much for spending this time with me. How can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at Ruthie Sloan. I also have a blog, which I should be blogging more. It's been such a crazy summer that I haven't had a lot of time. There's like half-written pieces that I haven't pressed publish to, which should be investing more time in this. But yes, I do have a blog. But yeah, Twitter is probably the easiest to get a hold of me, or you can email me. I have a ruthsloan@gmail.com. If you want to connect. If you don't hear back from me, I'm the worst at, like, I will see something and I've like 1,000 different screens on at one time in my mind. Just ping me again. And it's not because I'm trying to avoid anybody or anything. It's just the fact that I've probably had something that's come up and I've totally forgotten. So, but yes, I'd love to connect. And yeah, I'm easy going. And if you've got crazy ideas and things you want to bounce off of people,
I want to bounce a whole bunch of ideas off of you. So let's have that conversation. Is there anything you want to add before I play you out?
Yeah. The only thing I would say is that if you're not a part of a PLN, I would definitely suggest that you do, and think about moving your PLN beyond just characters into real life, and thinking about how that balance kind of affects your learning trajectory, because that's really been the difference maker in my own journey into education. So yeah, that's where I'll leave you at.
That's cool. All right. Well, it's a perfect place to leave me, and everybody else listening. I hope you have a fantastic day.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us on the P3, the Personal Playlist Podcast. I'm Noah Daniel. This is Voice Ed Radio, and I hope you have a fantastic day.